Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany. I'm right now here in my cramped study, as you can see in the background if you're watching this on YouTube. And I do have a guest live and direct from some phone booth in London. Hey.
Hey John, how's it going?
I'm doing great, thank you. And we'll soon learn what brought you to into this phone booth and stashing stuff away. But first, let's talk a little bit about you, because you are you have a master's in economics. That's usually not the average background for a startup founder. How did you decide to do economics and then did a pivot towards startups?
Yeah, I guess it sort of goes back to school. I always really liked the idea of running a business, running any business really. Sort of being an entrepreneur and being able to set your own agenda, and just my interest in the world of business kind of put me onto studying economics as a subject at school, which I really enjoyed. When I was trying to decide what to read at university, it was a trade-off between maths or economics, and I always felt like economics had it had the sort of practical application as well, and the maths was a little bit less challenging, but it was kind of bringing that real world application to what I liked about maths that made me quite interested in economics. And I guess as well the timing was quite relevant, because when I first started studying economics was just as the financial crash was happening, so it sort of felt like quite a fascinating time to be reading this, to be interested, because it seemed to me that everyone who'd sort of built businesses and institutions up till now, there was this sort of crisis going on, and even really experienced people didn't totally understand, and then people did start to understand, and it was this amazingly sort of interconnected system. Anyway, I sort of found it really, really fascinating. The course I went on to read was actually economics and business management, and it was a brilliant course. I really enjoyed it. I did my master's in economics really because I didn't want to go straight into any kind of city career. I didn't feel like anything like banking or consulting, and I mean those were the kind of companies that were coming around to the campus and trying to recruit. I didn't feel like any of that was really sort of singing to me. It didn't strike me as something I wanted to do, but I liked game theory. I liked what I was studying in terms of management. I actually really wanted an excuse to apply it to something in practice. My co-founder, Anthony, I should say, so we met when we were studying together at Oxford. We did economics together there. And in the year that I was doing my master's at UCL was the same year that we actually co-founded Stasia. And it was this year where we had the opportunity to kind of explore this idea and build on what was just a really basic concept. And I mean, we really saw it just as a sort of side hustle. When we first started, it was more a learning opportunity than anything else. I don't think either of us fully appreciated at the time the potential of what we were building. I mean, we were certainly excited about it, and we would have talked about how we sort of dreamed of building it into the company that it is today, and the company that it still has the potential to be. But it was very much like, let's just try, let's do something, let's learn from the experience. But anyway, yeah, so that's the background that kind of took me to London, where I was studying economics, which is where I was when we started Stasia.
And I was smiling because when you said the crisis, we do have some very senior listeners there. Most people cannot see you right now. I mean, everybody who hears you, because a lot of people would just listen to this interview, they can be already sure you're not talking about the crisis of 1917. What crisis did you have in mind?
Sorry, I was talking about the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. So this, as you remember, this was when the subprime mortgages in America sort of kick-started, or it was like a domino effect really, and then sort of so many economies went into recession, and there was Lehman Brothers, and I mean, for me at the time when I was just starting to study economics, it just seemed like this sort of massive chaotic mystery that I kind of wanted to understand a little bit better. And I mean, yeah, I think sort of from that point, if not slightly before, I was quite interested in the world of business and stocks and stuff, but never really from the point of view of wanting to go into the sort of city and trading. I think I always sort of had that angle where I wanted to be kind of, you know, at the the coal face of capitalism, actually running a business and getting my hands dirty, running my own thing. But I hope that clarifies.
Uh-huh. Okay, just a little bit teasing you. And I was wondering, when I first read and heard the idea about Stasher, I personally found it very good because I've spent one very long afternoon at JFK, because at the time I was planning to like leave New York in the late afternoon, early evening, or local time, and I was trying to go to JFK, put my luggage in some luggage storage, and then go and see some sites around. And actually, I want to see the supposed flying saucers from Man in Black. But actually, I was there at JFK, and they told me, "Oh, sorry, nothing here. You cannot store your luggage." And I said, "Okay, can I check in?" And they said, "Nope, 3 hours before." And so I was sitting there and wasting lifetime. So how did you get your idea? Because I had this experience and I never get the idea. Let's do the Airbnb of luggage storage.
I mean, I think that's one of the things I sort of love so much about being in this business is I think almost everyone I've ever told the idea to can either has experienced something just like yourself or can imagine themselves being in that experience where you're traveling and the last thing you want to do is be worried about looking after your luggage, or you don't want it to stop you from, you know, being able to enjoy yourself to the full. The idea for this, you know, it's funny. The idea for this actually came from a slightly different project that we originally worked on. So when we first had the idea for Stasher, it was more literally Airbnb for storage. It began when Anthony used to live really centrally between Euston and King's Cross. So these are two of the busiest stations in London for any listeners who aren't familiar. He used to live between them, and he often had friends, family asking if they could leave stuff at his place because it was so convenient. And so that was when we were talking about this, and we thought, you know what, maybe there's an idea here. Maybe sort of we could actually compete. We could offer a storage service in people's homes. Airbnb obviously was just beginning to be hugely popular. In fact, I mean, by that point it was hugely popular, but I think it was really becoming a sort of household name at that point. So people were increasingly familiar with sharing economy services. The sharing economy as a concept was sort of taking root. People were trusting it more, and the timing seemed really perfect to explore something like this. And so we just dived right in, and we made this website where people could book storage in Anthony's flat and in my flat. And for the beginning, those were the only two. We persuaded friends and family who somewhat reluctantly agreed to list their own homes on this website where people could book storage. And it was really, I'm glad that we did that. It was sort of essential because it allowed us to collect the initial data that kind of helped to validate the idea, but also drive the direction we should be taking it in. And I suppose it could have gone one of two ways, because there are other startups I've seen out there who've made, you know, real businesses out of long-term storage in people's homes. And I'm imagining here, you know, you've got like a whole garage or a shed or entire spare rooms, and you can do long-term storage for people who want an alternative to self-storage. But where we were looking at it at that point in time, we did quite serious research into self-storage. We saw it was a crowded space. It was competitive. There were a lot of warehouses. And by coincidence, all the early customers who were coming to us, they were interested in really short-term storage. So they were exactly as you described, you know, they were travelers who it was their last day and they just wanted the chance to sort of make the most of the city without having to drag their bags around with them. They'd been checked out and they couldn't leave their bag at their Airbnb or their vacation rental or even their hotel in sort of city centres where they're really busy. Or they were, they were sort of day trippers or visitors or even locals who were going somewhere and didn't want to bring their luggage or their bags or their work stuff or their belongings with them. And so we had this, we felt like we uncovered this niche of short-term storage. The only solution that existed at the time was station lockers. And in London, there's only a handful of them left. They're really expensive. They were charging like £12.50 per bag per day, which just seemed extortionate. And we figured, we can do this for half the price and we can scale. I mean, we don't have to set up facilities, hire staff to man them. We don't have to pay rents. We can find places that are willing to store stuff for half the price of that and roll it out at massive scale. And that was when we got really, really excited about the idea. And that was around December 2015, January 2016. And so we started working with businesses at that point. And that was when, we thought shops and hotels, they're looking for ways to make ancillary revenue. They're open very regular hours, if not 24/7. The one catch with doing that sort of service in our own homes was obviously that if people wanted short-term storage, then they needed you to be in all day, which was obviously something we were prepared to do for our first customers, but we figured this doesn't really scale, And I remember at least a couple of times I had to skip lectures and run back early to let someone in to pick up a bag, and I thought, it's just about worth it for me because this is my project, but to make this work at scale, we need a more reliable provision of storage, and that was where shops and hotels just started to make so much sense. So it was really, that was kind of the key pivot, and that was, as I say, it could have gone in a few directions, but I think that was the time when we realized that, we wanted to focus on short-term storage. We wanted to focus on tourism and events as the kind of like verticals, I suppose, for why customers were coming to us. And that's kind of, that was the foundation, really.
I realized you are going for tourists, especially because I love New York and I'm there frequently, also for work. And I then saw, as my co-host at the Startup News always describes it as the center of the universe, Times Square, because he works just around the corner. And I realized you are actually even providing opportunities to drop off your luggage straight at Times Square, right? There's like a small phone store around there, and so I realized, okay, that's very touristic. But before we get into a little bit of the details, how you guys are actually working, how this could work for me as a client, I was wondering, how do the people discover you guys? Because I didn't know you guys existed until I was approached by your very awesome PR lady. And admittedly, if I had known that before, I would have used it in London, in New York, and maybe some other places before.
Well, it's a very good question. And I mean, obviously, part of that is, as you say, it's that we've reached a stage now where we're looking to do a lot more sort of PR and outreach and get the brand out there. Up until that point, we've been pretty laser focused on channels with high intent. So what I mean by that is we've relied quite heavily on Google, for example. If people are searching for luggage storage, if they're looking for storage in a particular city, if they look for lockers, that sort of thing, that's when we'll capture people. We put a lot of effort into organic search results, obviously, to make sure that we rank well if people are looking for it. And likewise, there's obviously always Google paid channels as a way to sort of initially acquire customers as well. That's been pretty key for us. Another thing, obviously, that we've done is worked quite hard to partner with relevant referrers. The travel industry is actually a really fantastic industry to work in that respect, in that I think because understanding the way people travel is kind of key. Not everyone, there are some real super users here. There are people who travel all the time, especially business people, but not everyone sort of travels regularly. And so when you do have a customer in travel, you want to be sort of referring them around all your partners, all your affiliates, and likewise they do the same for you. So just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, if people are checking out of an Airbnb and it's managed by a property company that we work with, they'll tell that customer about Stasher as they're checking out and say, we can't provide luggage storage for you, but we have this service that we work with. And in fact, in some cases, we find even if they can provide luggage storage, they're happier to refer customers to us because they know that we'll provide the quality of service. It gets the customer out of the apartment and frees them to clean it up and make it ready for the next host without any of that for the next guest, without any of that kind of friction that can sort of make it a little bit tricky between check-in and check-outs. I mean, at the end of the day, Airbnb has become an extremely professionalized service now. I think gone are the days where it was just like someone's spare room and you've got this sort of friendly local host. I think by and large, a lot of what's going on now with Airbnb and with other vacation rentals is it's a real professional service. It's how people make a sort of major, it's their incomes. And what that means is that they are, ancillary services around vacation rentals, such as luggage storage, and there are several others as well, some of which we're looking to expand into. This is what they're after in order to make the service as professional, as slick as possible, and that's certainly our mission as a company, is to make travel more seamless for customers and for our sort of referral partners too.
Are you actually growing, so to say, in the shadow of Airbnb? Because it sounds like right now you're pretty much tied to them.
Not just Airbnb, I suppose it's worth saying. I mean, they're pretty iconic in the vacation rental industry. They are the go-to brand. But the crazy thing is that, they didn't invent this space. Vacation rental has been around for decades, if not longer, before Airbnb came around. They just did such a fantastic job of sort of building and branding their particular service. So I think it's fair to say that without Airbnb's success, it would have been much harder to build the business that we're building. At the same time, we're linked to them in the same way, I suppose, that a lot of our partners are, in that you've got sort of vacation rental management companies who list on Airbnb, who use it to drive a lot of traffic. Those same customers are then being referred to us. It's an ecosystem that's kind of built around Airbnb, but it's not limited just to Airbnb. I actually argue that a company like Booking.com, they've done, I don't have the exact stats, but my impression is they're almost as big as Airbnb when it comes to vacation rental bookings, having launched a lot more recently, but obviously they have a massive hotel inventory as well. There are other big players in the vacation rental space. There's Expedia's, VRBO, HomeAway. So there's a lot going on. Airbnb, I think, just happens to be the most iconic, but certainly their success is massively beneficial to us. And I mean, they're continuing to grow at a phenomenal rate. They overtook Expedia in terms of booked room nights recently. So the way that people travel has absolutely changed as a result of them.
I see, and if I do understand it right, your service kind of fulfills a double purpose. At first, the landlords kind of get the people out of their room to get them very early to prepare the room for the next person. Plus, you have like this phone shop I just talked about at Times Square that are actually generating traffic through your app because people want to drop off stuff there. How do you actually acquire the drop off sites?
Good question. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's very much a sort of a marketplace setup, and it's got all these different kind of actors within it. So the partners are key on the demand side, and then I suppose you'd call it the supply side, the guys who are supplying the storage. I mean, we've built up a massive network of them over time. I remember when we started, way back when, we managed to get about 10 hosts on the platform while we were sort of doing it as a side hustle. I remember thinking, once we had 10, we're like, yeah, now it's going to snowball. And ultimately, over time, it really has. And every host that we add makes it easier to add new hosts, which is great. I guess, I mean, without revealing too much, there's a few different ways that we sort of approach this problem of acquiring hosts. The interesting thing is, unlike Airbnb, where really they want to bring on as many hosts as possible, for us, there's actually a kind of a satiation point, as it were. So what I mean by that is that you wouldn't want every business in a city to be on Stasher, because it would make it hard to choose where to store your luggage, and it was also, I think, they wouldn't have enough sort of ancillary revenue coming through. It would be too dispersed to provide a meaningfully good quality of service. So we look to get sort of places at key spots near to train stations, near to tourist attractions. A lot of that will be sort of researched in advance. We'll contact them, we'll call them, we'll reach out to them through whatever channels we can. Going in person and selling is often key. And it's nice, like I say, I mean, the satiation point argument is key because you couldn't do this for every business in a city, but if you know which businesses make sense to target, then you can run these sort of trips to visit them. And it's been a process like that. You add places iteratively. We're really focused on sort of prioritizing our expansion, so we've always seen it as critical to be in as many places as possible. And I mean, officially, as of last week, we're live now on all 6 continents. We added our first South African stash points, which sees us live on Africa. So that was a really cool milestone as a company. But for us now, the key is sort of prioritizing like which cities to put our sort of growth efforts into. So I hope that answers your question without sort of giving too much sort of sensitive strategic info, but that's roughly the idea.
Oh, don't worry. You can give us more and more sensitive strategic information. It's just shared between you, me, and like 20,000 people listening to this podcast. So everything's totally fine. People cannot hear you laughing in the background. I had 2 more questions to that. First, what is the fanciest or strangest place where people can stash their luggage away? And second, how does it work for a potential client? Do they need an app?
Ooh, we have some really good places. I mean, we have some fantastic hotels in London, some really quite premium Premier Inns off the top of my head that have like really nice lounges. I'm sure we have some particularly weird and wonderful places around the world as well. Um, I know there's a particularly strange cafe in Japan. There's like I know we have like sort of a dog cafe in Canada somewhere. What else do we have? I'd have to dig around a little bit. I'm sure I can find stuff that's even weirder, but by and large, I should say we do try and go for places that are, either hotels that sort of give off a good level of like customer service quality, or shops that are sort of reliable. So it's a perk when we get the weird and wonderful places. Oh, we have a beach hut in Brighton, which is like a sort of Swedish arts and crafts center. The host who runs that, she's really lovely. So yeah, there's a fun mixture. And what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Sorry, I just had to laugh so hard because the headline of the interview is most likely going to be Stasher, your reason to visit a dog cafe in Canada. And my second question was, how is it for a user? Do they need an app? How does it work, like operationally for a client, for a user?
So there are apps, absolutely, that you can download and book, but also the website is mobile optimized. And actually, to be honest, we ran with just the website for quite a long time before investing money in the apps, purely because, as I say, we were acquiring most of our customers through Google, so it made sense to be web first, and was originally slightly easier for us to build. But in terms of booking, it's super quick. So from point of download or point of opening the website, you can have a booking within 2 minutes. It's designed to be somewhere between Airbnb and Uber in terms of experience. And what I mean by that is, the process is you search for the city or town or wherever it is that you need storage. You'll get a map with all the different options. Unlike Airbnb, there's not so much to filter on. I mean, you've got opening hours and you've got the sort of location. Prices are pretty standardized, so there's really not an awful lot to sort of distinguish between them. It's purely about what's most convenient for your plans. And so in that way, it's kind of closer to Uber, except that it's not that you'll take the next place because, with opening hours and stuff, you might want to factor in a few things. Anyway, you click the place you want. It takes less than a minute to sort of do the payment form, and you're done. And I mean, then you've got a booking and you can take it right in. And I think what we find is actually the majority of customers are booking and using it same day. It's not so much a sort of planned in advance service for like, oh, I'm going traveling, I will need this. It's very much like, oh, I'm here now, I've got my bags, what can I do with them?
I see. And before we get towards the end of the interview, I have a few more questions, like how you guys are actually financed. Are you looking for an investor right now?
Yeah, so we've been venture backed since about 2017. In 2016, when we were first kind of running this as a side hustle, we took some angel funding from the CEO of Big Yellow Storage. That was quite a good story. So the CEO of Big Yellow is a FTSE 250 company, the biggest self-storage company in the UK. We cold emailed him just to say, hey, we have this storage idea and we'd like to get some advice on it because, we're doing short-term storage. So it's a sort of, it's adjacent, it's not competitive. Anyway, to our delight, this guy actually, he read our email and, and took the time not only to reply to it, but to invite us in and to question us about the model. So he came on board as one of our first angel investors off the back of a cold email, which is amazing because that really sort of kickstarted the process for us. I think without that sort of boost at that point in time, we would probably have been a little bit too cautious about quitting our jobs and going full time on this. I think we really did want to kind of validate the idea with external funding and give ourselves that runway to try and build a team and grow it. And 2017 was a great year for us. I mean, as two founders, we went full time. We began hiring around the summer. Growth was ridiculous. It's obviously much easier to have exponential growth when you're building off of small numbers, but it was really, really awesome to see it go from like 1 bag a day to 100 bags a day. And then we took on venture funding. That was in 2017. I think we've been very lucky with the investors that we've brought on as well. I think actually from my experience of sort of working with investors, I think it's hugely important that you personally get on well with them and professionally, and you feel like you can work together. I think we've been lucky to bring on investors that are so aligned in terms of vision and so so positive about the way that they work with us. We are in fact looking for venture funding again at the moment. We're close to sort of bringing around to conclusion this autumn. I'm hoping we'll be able to sort of publish some results about that around Christmas time. And the idea again with that is just that we've actually, I mean, the beautiful thing about this model is it's so asset light that it can run itself profitably. And the reason that we want to take venture funding instead is just that I think we see so much potential with scale here, and it's so important to us to be international as quickly as possible. Just to sort of work with people as quickly as we can to build up the biggest brand. I think it's a really exciting space right now. I could name all our competitors, but I bet most people in the world won't even have heard of us, or certainly not any of them. And so it's that exciting stage where actually we're all looking to build up a sort of a brand that people recognize. We want to be the brand that people associate with the service. I'd love it to be that whenever anyone else kind of comes across one of our competitors, they're like, oh yeah, it's a Stasher competitor. That's the position we want to put ourselves in. And for us, that means that we want to be hiring the best team right now and just expanding our network of hosts, making sure we have the best, most convenient service all around the world, and that we're working with the best partners to grow the business. So for us, it's about acceleration, really. I think I sometimes feel a little bit like, we could run it more slowly, organically, off the back of the sort of the profits that we could be generating. But I think it's just too exciting an opportunity not to invest venture money in and try and grow to its accelerate that growth, get it to the real sort of international potential that it has.
And you told us already a little bit of my next question, even though you didn't know what it would be. What are you looking for? So you're looking for hosts around the world, any specific area, any specific cities?
Yeah, a big focus for us in the next year is going to be North America and also sort of Southeast Asia, Australia. So when we launched, we were very much like UK based, and then we expanded around Europe. and we put a lot of our efforts into Europe. Um, North America is obviously a massive market, and we've been present there for a long time, but we've been sort of waiting basically to have the opportunity to really put our growth and attention in there. And I think we've already seen great returns to the sort of limited effort that we have been able to make in America. So I'm really excited about what's going to go on there. And the same for Southeast Asia, Australia. I mean, it's such a massive market for tourism. And then more midterm, I mean, I'm really excited about getting South America and even parts of Africa up and running. That I think will probably be, that's it's going to be 1 to 2 years away before we have really the same level of focus applied there. But I think I find it hugely cool that we have this service and it can be live all around the world. We have this fantastic map on our sort of internal dashboards, and you can see where people are storing bags each day, and it's so fun to see dots on every continent popping up. So uh, that's going to be it's going to be a really big part of our focus, especially North America.
I have one more question because you're always talking about luggage. I was wondering, when you're traveling, what do you travel with?
Do you know, there's an irony to this because I pack extremely light when I travel. I'm quite minimalist as a person. That being said, obviously, the great thing about Stasher is that it's designed to be that you've got storage anywhere you might reasonably travel. So it has freed me up to pack a little bit more when I do go traveling. But I have a trusty backpack that I took traveling when I was younger, which I don't have to check in on planes. I suppose what I'm trading off here is my passion for supporting my own business against my deep reluctance to ever put my bag through the airline hold check-in process. But no, I generally travel with a backpack, so I like traveling light. What I have done, to be fair, is travel with that backpack and put it into storage with Stasher after having checked out, so that I don't have to drag the whole thing around with me. So that's my ideal way to travel. Really, is pack light enough not to have to check in luggage, but not so light that you can't sort of benefit from stashing it at the end of a trip.
Only two more questions left for me. The This one would be, if you could describe your life either as a book or movie title or combination of both, what would it be and why?
Interesting. It's such a tricky question, this. And I knew you were going to ask me, and I've been trying to think of an answer desperately throughout this interview. I remember you said yours was Forrest Gump, right? Or was it Forrest Gump and Pinky?
Yes, a mix of Forrest Gump and Pinky in the Brain.
And what's the story behind that?
Well, Forrest Gump, he's doing the best he can with what he has, and Brain is always trying to conquer the world. So make you get.
Yeah, it's a good answer. And Forrest is in such interesting places at interesting times, isn't he? Damn, I need to think of an answer for this. John, do you mind if I come back to you on this one? I'm really sorry. I'll keep thinking while you ask me the next.
Okay, and last question would be, how on earth did you end up in the strange phone booth?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone can see me. Will people be able to see the videos? It's a bizarre phone booth. It's sort of got this black and white pattern that's almost like being inside an MC Escher drawing. It's like it's sort of playing a visual illusion on you. This is just a phone booth that's in our co-working space. So I'm just in our co-working space office in London, really near Old Street. The phone booths just happen to have really, really bizarre designs. But it's I suppose it adds something to the backdrop of this video. I'm just trying to think of recent films and books that I've read and enjoyed. I mean, there's a book that I absolutely love, which is Enlightenment by Steven Pinker, and it came out pretty recently, but it's about he kind of sort of flips the negativity of current news trends on their head, and he says if you look at trend lines rather than headlines, you see that the world is always sort of building towards greater and greater progress. And I thought it was a hugely insightful book, because I think it's easy to feel a little bit sort of overwhelmed by bad news and by sort of particular stories, but cognitive biases impair so many of our sort of perceptions of the world and the state of things. I mean, one of my favorite books as a student was Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, and for anyone who's not familiar with that, it's a brilliant sort of insight into the way that the human mind sort of processes information and the cognitive biases that we can be subject to. Case in point is the availability bias. If you're able to recall a story more quickly because either it's sort of graphic or it's happened recently, it leads you to overestimate the frequency with which events take place. And that's kind of what Steven Pinker's talking about in his book, is that it's very easy to sort of be captured with this sense of gloom and doom. And I mean, that's not to say that there isn't some gloom and doom in the world, especially with the recent state of politics. My country, Britain, very, very much included in that. But I think what I like about the book, and I guess the sort of relevance to us, is that it's about sort of spinning a positive narrative. And I think one of the things we value at Stasher a lot, and I value as a person, is like a real sort of optimism and a belief that you can make the world better, without sounding too grandiose. Because I mean, you know, we're not saving lives, we're storing luggage. But the vision here is to make people, you know, to give people a greater ability to enjoy their time and maximize their experiences, and ultimately that's kind of what life is all about, really. So I guess I'd for want of a better example, and partly subject to my own availability bias because it's a book I read recently, I'd probably go with Enlightenment. It's a really brilliant book, and it does spell out the ways that actually our lot as human beings has sort of dramatically improved over the last sort of century, especially sort of the further back in time you go, the comparison becomes even more stark. But it's a brilliant book, and he sort of points out as well all the sort of the problems that we face and the way that we've overcome problems in the past. And I'd go with that.
Great. Only thing left for me to say is thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. For everybody who's just listening or seeing the edit, we have been talking for almost 45 minutes here online. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thank you very much for having me.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.